Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. Today is Monday, that is the 12th day of January 2026. I'm continuing reading from a particular book here called Exodus, and that is not Exodus, but Kabbalah and Exodus, I should say. And this book is simply a book that's done by a gentleman named Shimon, Halevi, a Jewish Kabbalist. And the title of the chapter simply is A Breakthrough in Exodus chapter 10 and 12 of the book, again, Kabbalah and Exodus. So let's get into the reading here. So it's a breakthrough. Something's happening here, chapter 12. So before Moses and Aaron approached Pharaoh for the 8th time, the Lord said to them, quote, "For I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I might show these signs before him, and thou mayest tell us in the ears of thy son and of thy son's son what things I have wrought in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that you may know how I am the Lord." End quote. The scale of this passage speaks of the majestic of the creator of the universe and the effect on human history of divine intervention, which can override the world of natural laws. On the individual level, the effect of such an intrusion into a routine existence usually profoundly shakes the person out of his habits and opens up questions as to the meaning of life. Anyone on a enter path knows of at least one miracle in his life that has awakened or awoken him out of spiritual sleep. On the scale of a nation, Israel at this moment, I should say, in the Exodus story, is approaching just such a point of awakening. When Moses and Aaron, who represent the as yet only developed part of the psyche, yes, folks, they knew this long ago, psychology, stood before Pharaoh, the animal soul. That's what Aaron represents to Pharaoh. Pharaoh's not a quote unquote king. He's a king in your own body. That's who Pharaoh is within yourself. And repeated the words of the Lord, quote, "How long will thou refuse to humble thyself before me?" End quote. And he says, continue, "Let my people go that thou mayst serve me." End quote. Pharaoh at first gave ground. He then, on hearing that the demand was still for all the Israelites, reversed his decision and had the brothers driven from his court or his consciousness. Okay? You see, this is internal. This reaction brought its results. The locusts that fell upon Egypt began to devour what wealth and resources had been left after the other plagues. Soon there was nothing green in the land. That is the basic vegetable soul. Again, we're talking not physical, but spiritual here. That supports the animal soul in the land. That is the basic vegetable soul that supports the animal soul, was now threatened. This frightened Pharaoh, and he began to beg for help. The animal soul becomes quite irrational when faced with extinction. However, he yet again began self-assured once the locusts had gone and Egypt was no longer threatened. So the night plague of darkness then descended upon all Egypt except for the land of Goshen. Seen Kabbalistically, that is, the locust represents the destruction of the Banal, B-I-N-A-H, or the life form system of Egypt, while the darkness is the curtailment of the Hakam, or this life force. Thus, during the darkness, no Egyptians stirred for 3 days. Wow. 3 days again, folks. That number 3 comes up many times in Scripture. This creates a situation of total paralysis, I should say, for both the vegetable and the animal level of Egypt, which is the physical attributes of who we are. And so Pharaoh was forced to summon Moses and tell him to take the Israelites and go and worship the Lord. However, this was on a condition that their flocks must be left behind. In other words, that condition, always holding on. That is, the natural wealth of vitality of the Israelites was to be retained by Egypt. In other words, we'll let you go, but we're not going to let you take your animals with you, which would mean that basically they would not make it, you see. Moses said Israel needed the flocks for food and for sacrifice, but Pharaoh reacted as only the panic-stricken animal's soul can, by dismissing the whole business from his uncomprehending mind and threatening death if he should ever see Moses again. Moses responded gravely, saying, "Indeed, I shall never see your face again." End quote. So you stepped up. You're now we're going to play hardball. Type of thing. You see. In preparation for the separation of the two nations or levels, which is what it's about, the divine now instructed Moses to get the Israelites ready. They were to approach the Egyptians and ask them for jewelry and gold, that is, for the riches of the physical world. Then they were to prepare for the Passover, which was a ritual especially designed to draw all the people, or the different aspects of the psyche, together into a coordinated whole, W-H-O-L-E, and so make the momentous time into a profound initiation. The individual parallel is often the same, in that some ritual act is performed to mark a change of state. In some traditions, there are elaborate ceremonies. In others, a simple but potent gesture is made to indicate the passage from bondage to freedom. The form of the Passover ritual is described in detail in the Bible. In the beginning, it is seen as taking place in the first month of the year, on the 10th day. That is the beginning of a new cycle. And after the first 10 stages of Sephirah, preparations are completed. On this day, a lamb without blemish is taken to the household and kept by the community until the 14th day. That is half a Usada, or lunar cycle. So the 14 would be representing what we call 28 days, is what I'm assuming here in the month. When it is slaughtered at the crucial point of dusk in the daily rhythm, now, while these instructions may seem primitive to us, they were within the context of a time which accepted esoteric ideas in the ritual form of local custom, which is what is church speaking of is not esoteric, not talking inward. They're speaking of the exoteric, which is the outward part, you see. That's why they believe in the literal interpretation of Scripture. Ideas in the ritual form of local custom. Thus, the lamb is the killing of the animal will in Israel. I'll repeat that. Thus, the lamb is the killing of the animal will in Israel, and its blood smeared on the door lintel, the outward sign of the achievement. That's Lintel. It was also a protection against the angel of death, who was to pass over the land, taking the lives of the Egyptian firstborn, and afflicting the gods of Egypt. The detailed account of what is to be eaten at this Last Supper in Egypt is full of symbolism that is used up to the present time in every Jewish household that celebrates the Passover. There is, for example, the dish that looks like cement. This was salt water and bitter herbs representing the hard labor, that is, the tears and the harshness of that period. It is a custom that the menfolk lean on cushions to recall the ease of the Egyptians, and many other symbols such as unleavened bread. and the awaited angels wine cup as act as reminders of this historic and personal stage of development. So this is a spiritual development here, folks. Israel represents the spirit. Egypt represents the physical. Perhaps the most esoteric instruction of the method by which which one eats this Last Supper, the text runs, quote, "You shall have your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste," end quote. Today, the national urgency has gone from the Passover, but the spiritual implication is made plain in the ceremony which each person must consider as if he were actually an Israelite in readiness to leave the land of bondage. In other words, they're ready to leave the physical aspect of who they are and enter Canaan, to leave Egypt, which was all representing the physical world, and moving to the spiritual world, you see. Hold on just a second for something here. So the Israelites were told to be prepared for rapid departure because the most devastating plague was about to strike Egypt. The death of the firstborn was to sever the connection between the body and the psyche. In the shock, the Egyptians would be so preoccupied that they would allow the Israelites to go. On the individual level, a shock often releases the psyche from its body-bound habits and precipitates inner movement. Thus, when the angel of death has destroyed the firstborn, the link with Egypt was broken, and the Israelites could go, taking everything they possessed with them. So it's a separation, you see. As the Israelites left the house of bondage, the Egyptian gave them everything they wanted and more in order to be rid of them before all Egypt was destroyed. On the individual level, this initial freedom is only the beginning. While the body had been subdued in submission, the psyche, like the children of Israel, is at this point still a tribal rabble, or an unorganized collection of feelings, thoughts, and actions. The ordering of such undisciplined elements is not instantaneous, nor is it determination of the animal soul so easily ignored after the shock of its defeat has passed. So that is the end of chapter 12 tonight from the book called Kabbalah and Exodus. So we'll end here tonight. I appreciate you all being here. This is spiritual food to those who have ears to hear, you see. If not, it doesn't mean anything. But those who are seeking deeper things, this is spiritual food. So we'll look at chapter 13 probably tomorrow sometime. I'll do another recording of it. And again, thank you for being here. Appreciate you attending. And I hope that this makes some sense to you. I've done quite a few recordings of this, actually. Started last week. This is a very good book. It is really right on the hammer hits the nail with these. So thank you again. Again, you can watch this on my YouTube channel, simply Discerning What Is True. And also, if you're not on my YouTube channel, it should be on my Facebook channel, simply Brent Hunt. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for being here. Have a good evening or good morning, wherever you are. Take care. Good night.